Good evening, everybody.
Okay, go for it.
On behalf of all of the Chabad centers, UIC, Riverdale, Markham, Greenwich, and Harbor Point, welcome to another evening of resilience. How we tap into the power and the beauty of our Torah to gather strength during these very challenging times. This is a very special evening. We're going to hear in a moment from Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf. And as I say those words, I'm reminded of the young boy who comes into a synagogue and he hears that this rabbi is not just any rabbi, he's a rabbi doctor. And the boy says, "Rabbi doctor, what's he a doctor for?" He says, "Well, he's a doctor of philosophy." Philosophy, what kind of illness is that? So, our Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf, he's a real doctor, and he actually is here in this environment, as he always is wherever he goes, to heal the possible illnesses that philosophy can create and to show us the healing that philosophy does provide. I cannot even count how many times our community has had the privilege to host Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf. He was the first speaker that came to our community 24 years ago, and he was invited back for a series of about 7 years, every year, one after the other, not just to Chabad, but other parts of the community invited him. And then I just lost track of the amount of times that he really was here, and the amount of lives that he's touched is far beyond anything that we can count. But I do want to share, I see some of the faces here tonight who can testify that their lives have been changed by the great spiritual teachings of Torah and Kabbalah that Reb Laibl shares with us. I just want to say one thing that I learned in one of the first times that Dr. Wolf spoke. What he taught me is, I always learn something new, but the first time he was talking about the word Kabbalah. And Kabbalah I always thought of in its very literal sense, which is what it means. It's a tradition. Kabbalah means receive. But he pointed out then, and I think it's so relevant for today, most relevant for today, that the word Kabbalah also comes from the Hebrew etymological root, which means parallel. You have in the tabernacle, the coverings of the tabernacle were sewn, were put together parallel to each other, the buttons to the holes. Makbilois salulois, they were parallel. And the power of Kabbalah, especially when it's taught through the right teachers, only when it's taught through the right teachers, as our teacher here tonight is, the power of Kabbalah is that it allows us to tap in to the parallel, true spiritual universe that informs everything in our lives, everything in the entire world. And that is so important when the world, on a global, on a communal, and on an individual crisis level, is going through the crisis that it's going through right now. This is absolutely life-saving wisdom, the wisdom of the Torah, especially within the context of Kabbalah, to inform us what is going on around us right now, and most importantly, how do we deal with it in a proper way, in a way that we can come out of the difficulties that we face even in an even better state of being than when we went in. So without any further ado, we'd like to ask Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf to begin his presentation, and that will be followed by the questions and answers that'll be moderated by my esteemed brother-in-law, Rabbi Plotkin. Rabbi Wolf.
Thank you very, very much for that very generous introduction. I'm getting some sort of an echo, so maybe you could mute everyone else or see if we can get rid of the echo.
I'll try to mute everyone, and then you'll unmute yourself. Okay, let's try that. Okay.
Fine.
Yourself, Rabbi Wolf. You need to unmute yourself now.
There we go. So, Rabbi Deren, it's really wonderful to see you again, and thank you again for your very, very kind words. And the Plotkins, who I haven't been with for some time, so lovely to see you. But particularly gratifying to recognize faces that I've seen in the past and are joining me again. It's wonderful to see old friends anew. It is a pity that we're meeting at the moment in a rather difficult and trying set of circumstances. Our lives are being complicated by a plague. At the same time, we're finding political schisms in the world, and especially in the United States. And it's clear that we're undergoing some metamorphosis in context of world history, which is one of the features that the elders have always taught us will happen before the coming of Mashiach. So we are the generation that's been privileged to live a life of confusion. And now let's see if we can deconfuse it to some extent and allow ourselves to continue the mission. I note that in the topic, the words fear and anxiety are certainly up, center, and front. I'm going to divide this presentation into 3 sessions, or 3 component parts. The first part, I'm going to explain, according to the way that Hasidus explains Kabbalah, what is the nature of the human being? What causes us to have a sense of consciousness and awareness? And whether we have the capacity to be able to master that flow of consciousness towards positive ends. I'm going to include, subsequent to that, a meditation session using meditation exercise in order to achieve the goals that I've set for our session, and explain beforehand a little bit about what meditation is. And then the third component part will be a question and answer where I have the opportunity to learn from you. And I do look forward to that opportunity because every single individual is a unique individual contributing uniqueness in the world. You have been reincarnated into this time, into this space, because each one of you has the capacity to ensure that you are co-creators of an unfinished symphony, the symphony of Briat HaOlam, the creation of the world. Let me begin this way by allowing us to understand who we are. 5 seconds before a person dies, God forbid, we should all live bis 120. 5 seconds before the person dies, the person hears perfectly. Let's assume that. The hearing is perfect. 5 seconds after a person dies, the person no longer hears. And you will say, but that's obvious. The person is dead. But what does it mean, the person is dead? There's been no effective decomposition of the physiology of the ear in those 5 seconds. Nothing has essentially changed. The person's integrity in terms of shape and form remain, and yet the person can't hear. It means that although the physiology, the mechanics of the body are intact, something's gone AWOL, something's gone missing. Let's give that missing element a name. Let's call it the neshama. Call it energy. I don't mind what name you attribute to it. But you will agree with me that that transformation from the 5 seconds before to the 5 seconds later means something has stopped. Life force. Same with the eye. When a person dies, the integrity of the eye, the physiological mechanics of the eye is still optimized, and they stop seeing. Likewise with the brain. 5 seconds earlier, they were thinking. 5 seconds later, no thought. It means that somewhere the life force has ceased to flow through the body. In other words, we are a duality. We are the mechanism of physiological body, and we are also the flow of animation that allows that body to come alive, or we are alive. That duality of soul and body is what you and I navigate every single moment. Every single moment, you and I are the steering of the ship of consciousness that flows through our being. When the life force flows through the ear, the human consciousness of that is perceived as hearing. Through the eye, the human consciousness of the flow of that life force through the body of the eye is perceived as seeing. And through the brain, which is just machinery, complex, admittedly, biological machinery, but only when the life force flows through the machinery of the brain do we have the human consciousness experience of thought, cogitation, intellect, mind, all these different English words which overlap with each other because English derives from so many different source languages. Consciousness in totality is our experience of the neshama flowing through the guf, the soul flowing through the body. And as I said earlier, you and I can steer it. I'm going to focus on two aspects of consciousness, mind and heart, or the way that we perceive reality through thinking processes and through feeling processes, mind and emotion. You and I have been given a wonderful gift called Bechira Chofshis, free choice, meaning we have the freedom to respond to every exigency of life freely. I can respond to the COVID epidemic with fear and anxiety, or I can respond to it with faith and a sense of inner confidence. It's my choice. An exercise of that choice is what this session is all about. Admittedly, we tend to be programmed by our acculturalization, the society in which we live in. And yes, we are given proclivities through our genetic makeup. And yes, home modeling, formative childhood circumstances also provide us with a certain inclination in life. But these three factors do not enslave us. Every one of us has the capacity to be able to express freely, notwithstanding these three tendencies. And Hashem has introduced into our life all three as our obstacle course, so that the true me can respond to these challenges and express freely who I truly am. We have in today's world, however, a factor which our previous forebears and generations did not have. And that is the factor of media. And the media and the internet is not a beneficent educational institution. It's a commercialized mechanism in order to gain big profits for sponsors, for owners, and others. But media knows full well its psychology. It knows that if it can create fear and anxiety in us, we'll be glued to the screen. And therefore, every year, the images in the film industry become starker. They become more shocking, shock value. The sexuality, it becomes more foremost. Fear becomes a better way of ensuring that we feel somehow perversely we are alive, and it becomes addictive. So we're living also today under the influence of media. And the media is a production. The media is not unlike a movie. The so-called neutral news service in the evening, or now 24 hours, is carefully produced, highly opinionated, and bereft of objectivity, and is a very powerful influence that enters into our consciousness. So how do we withstand all this? How do we become the true me in context of all these features? How can we but fail to be affected by the kind of goings on in Congress that we saw picturesquely the other day on screen, calculated to ensure that it unsettles us? And the short answer is to understand better the inner dichotomy. Let me go back to spiritual orientation of the nature of the being. I said you have a life force, and I said let's call it a neshama, but it's more complicated than that. And I heard earlier some of you discuss having attended your rabbi or Rebbitzin's Tanya Shirim, so might be familiar with what I'm going to say. The life force, the neshama, as it enters into our being, and you know when it enters into our being? At the moment of conception. That first cell. The neshama has a small part of it already integrated in that cell. That's why the cell is a cell, while most of it hovers around it, so to speak. And as that cell multiplies, and there's more integration of the neshama, and finally birth, then we have a fuller integration of soul and body. But that life force has two diverse strings, flows, tendencies. One of these we call the nefesh bahamis, the animalistic side of self, which is colloquial terminology for my ego self, self-centeredness, or sense of personal security. And I have another side of self, nefesh elokis, which is my altruistic side, the other-centeredness, my connection to godliness. Let's talk momentarily about these two tendencies, because they'll be crucial to understand what is stress, what is anxiety. The lower order self, which we called the animalistic self, is not bad in any moralistic value stance. It seeks our security, which means it must be perforce self-centered. It seeks food, clothing, shelter, as Maslow's hierarchical model postulates. Nothing wrong with food, clothing, shelter. They're essentials. You can't live without them. But how much food? How much clothing? How much shelter? I will not eat any food that is not Master Chef food. Clothing, unless it's got a designer label, I'm not part of it. Shelter, I must have a mansion like Gone with the Wind, with pillars in front, chandeliers in every room, including the toilet. In other words, the lower order self wants and wants and wants. It shores up security against all logic. More, more, more. I've made my $1 million. Now I need 10 million. I remember counseling an individual a dozen years ago when we had that blip in the economy. And a lot of people lost a lot of money. And this multi-billionaire that I was counseling had lost his fortune from 1.2 billion to a mere 500 million. He cried like a baby. I'm not exaggerating. Feeling that he no longer has a roof over his head, only $500 million. He'd lost 700 million. He honestly felt bereft, poor. It's all relative. The Nefesh Bahamis always wants more and more. Comes along our higher order self, the Nefesh Elokis, and tries to tame the wild stallion of the Nefesh Bahamis, the lower order self, and says, Ad Kan, this is what you need sensibly. Now shift to self-actualization. Now shift to higher order self. Now shift in terms of other-centeredness instead of preoccupation with self-centeredness. Shift to godliness. This conflict takes place all the time. Stress is the way we exhibit that conflict. Stress means I can't reconcile the two. They're at war. And that tension I feel adversely. And we know full well that stress adversely affects health and well-being. Stress and anxiety filter down to the cellular level of the body. They create ill health. They create early death. Do we have a choice? Are we not living in a world of stress? I'm going to tell you the answer is no. What do I mean? Stress does not exist out there. Stress exists in here, meaning there is nothing out there, an illness called stress, which you catch like COVID. Stress is, and listen carefully, the way I choose to respond to what is happening out there. And if I don't give myself free choice, if I become enslaved to media projection, newspaper headlines, and don't allow my higher order self, the Nefesh Elokis, to arise and tame that wild stallion of Nefesh Bahamis, fear, anxiety, I will suffer. So what does it mean to de-stress, to unstress, to neutralize anxiety? It means that I have to change the way that I interpret reality. I have to take the consciousness of mind and apply it so that I see the world differently. You'll say to me, but how can I see the world differently? Aren't there facts out there? Facts exist. Your response to facts is your choice. Yes, there is hurt around. But at the same time, look at the statistics. 94% of the world is unaffected by COVID. Why are we focusing on the 6%? Of course, we need to have sympathy, empathy, and it is innately seemingly cruel that people are suffering, but 94% are not. We know that a very high percentage, again in the 90s, who have COVID survive very well, thank you, with only a very small percentage and very high in the age group where there are underlying issues, unfortunately may not survive. It is a plague and it is horrible. and yet the vast majority survive very well. In other words, proportionalize. I'm not trying to be in any shape or form unempathic, but I am indicating the methodology of response. Response means that I need to have a real, honest vantage point, which is correct, not in any way thrown into my consciousness and overtaking it. Having said that, think to the last moment that you got upset, the last time you got angry, the last time you experienced fear. The vast majority of times that we are anxious and have fear is because you and I become at that moment prophets, Prophets. We assumed the mantle of prophets. We're prophesizing. Tomorrow is going to be worse than today. I'm scared. I'm projecting into the future. You know what's going to happen? A, B, and C. Tell me something. When were you ordained as a prophet? When did you receive your letters after your name? PRDS, not PhDS. In other words, are you a prophet? So tell me, is there not a 50-50 probability that any projection you might make is going to be accurate or not accurate? So why not opt for the cup being half full than half empty? Why do you need to opt for fear and anxiety instead of, and I'm going to coin two words now, emunah and bitachon, faith and trust? It's not logical to jump to one as opposed to the other. So if it's 50-50, you have choice. That's what choice is. When it's equal, that's when true choice exists. Choice doesn't exist when the intellect forces you to conclude. Choice exists when it's equally weighted. That's what Bechira Chofshis is. And you and I need to exercise it, especially in the kind of world that we live in today. How do you do that? Well, let's define our terms. What do we mean? Since we've spoken a bit about anxiety, we've spoken a bit about fear, let's speak about a little bit about faith and trust, emunah and bitachon. What is emunah and bitachon? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained it very pragmatically in the following manner. Listen carefully. Emunah is the belief that everything that has ever happened to you is for your current good. Again, everything that has ever happened to you in the past is for your current good. Bitachon is the belief that the challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. The challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. Note, emunah deals from the past to the present. Whatever's ever happened to you is somehow for your current good. Bitachon works from the present to the future. The challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. Now, can I prove this to you? Absolutely not. Can you disprove it? Absolutely not. We're on equal ground. So you can choose between saying tomorrow is going to be terrible, look what's happening in the world, look what the news media is telling us, or you can say, you know what, tomorrow's going to be much better than today because I have bitachon and I have abuna because I've seen it in the past that always, throughout all of history, we've always moved away from the edge of disaster into positivity. Whether we talk about wars, whether we talk about illness, here we are, you and I, alive, well, and kicking, because that's history. And Muna tells us that whatever's happened in the past is somehow for our current good, in ways that we may never, ever understand. And yes, the challenge will be met because Hashem always gives us the resources to be able to overcome. It's very interesting. You remember that not long ago, less than 8 months ago, there was a prediction by most of the authorities that the COVID vaccine will not be discovered for at least 5 years. I don't know if you remember back then. That's what it was said. It was discovered less than 1 year. And notice how it happened. As soon as one particular research group in the world was able to publicly announce that it has the vaccine and it's trialing it, and it's got X% efficiency in the 90 percentile range. But as soon as it announced it, within a very short time, another laboratory in another place in the world announced they had also discovered a vaccine, not even the same kind of vaccine, and 3 or 4 other labs in the world soon after. What's going on? So listen to how the Frierdiker Rebbe explains this phenomenon. In his work, known as Likutei Diburim, in the opening page, the Frierdiker Rebbe notes you can project a thought to someone across the other side of the world, and with your thought, affect them materially and spiritually. In other words, your thoughts travel through the ether of space. Your consciousness moves beyond yourself. You don't end at the surface of your skin. And if you focus that, you can actually direct it. All knowledge ends up somewhere in the ether of space. One laboratory makes a breakthrough, almost immediately another laboratory makes a breakthrough because something of the success travels through the ether of space and affects the capacity of another group of people. This is very important because if all of us work in synergy using emunah and bitochen, it means we change and recalibrate the nature of the world. You individually have the power to affect the world. Don't see this as an exaggeration. I mean it with absolute sincerity. Every single person projects an essence of himself or herself into the world. If you project fear, then fear becomes that domino effect, that multiplier effect, that butterfly effect. But if you project positivity, that too becomes the effect in the world. I want you to undertake a role of leadership in your family, in your friendship grouping, and in community. I want you to speak positively. I want you to be humble and recognize you can't predict the future. I want you to choose the cup as half full, not half empty. I want you to believe that. That will neutralize fear and anxiety in yourself. You'll lead a much more rewarding life in 2 ways. Health, as I said earlier, and secondly, as Harvard University last year produced the results of a multi-decade study as to what are the primary features that produce happiness in life. And you know what was the dominant feature, head and shoulders above any other factor? Relationships. The quality of relationships. Now, you know and I know that we gravitate towards happy people much more quickly than to people who seemingly are stressed and seemingly are negative. People who are positive attract people. Relationships become much more enriched. Therefore, the quotient of happiness increases. So emunah and bitochen has a feature factor also in terms of the quality of your life. These are just some thoughts derived from Hasidus and some contemporary psychological analyses that demonstrate how you and I have the capacity to alter the state of our lives. And when I say health and wellness, and I said fear and anxiety hurts the cells of the body, makes us more open to infection, more open to COVID. The converse is also true. Positivity and confidence is a major factor in our defense mechanisms, in our inner defense mechanisms, which of course are health-based. Having said what I've said so far, I'd like to segue into an exercise where we can implant some of these realities into our very being. Now, I use meditation as a technique. Meditation is not an end in its own right. You should never meditate because I want to meditate. Don't listen to that jargon. That's ridiculous. Meditation is only a tool. And every tool has to be used when it needs to be used and has to be used wisely when it's used. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, meditation isn't for everybody, but there are circumstances when the use of this tool is very useful. I use the tool for two primary goals. One, health and wellness, because well-being is a mitzvah. It's as much a mitzvah to maintain health and well-being as it is to keep Shabbos and Kashrus. No difference. And if people are hurting themselves, especially through stress and fear, anxiety, I have found that it's possible to use the tool of meditation to assist them. The second way we use the tool of meditation is to be able to embrace wisdom in a way that becomes behaviorally expressed. So, for example, Lubavitcher Hasidim, before davening in the morning, before praying, would spend time studying wisdom teachings of our masters, of our Rebbes, and then choose one item of innate understanding, insight of the Rebbes, and spend time inserting it within our consciousness. A format of meditation called hisbonenus. I'm not going to use that today. I'm going to opt for, because of our time frame, the first one, to use it for health and well-being. Just an interesting little bit of history. In 1979, the Lubavitcher Rebbe made a public pronouncement about meditation in a climate where most rabbis had forbidden the practice of meditation. Why? Because that was the period, if you recall, when enterprising Hindu gurus made their way across from the east to the west and introduced their formats of meditation. And there was unfortunately a lot of avodah zarah, idol worship elements involved in that practice, and the rabbis forbade it. But the Rebbe said, and these aren't the Rebbe's words, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are redeeming virtues in the practice if it's used well. As I said earlier, use the tool wisely. And he said, strip the meditations of the avodah zarah elements and allow them to be used when they need to be used for people who could benefit. So I'm going to take you through a little meditational exercise, a visualization in this particular instance. There are many different modalities. And in so doing, I'm going to try to implant within us the capacity of confidence. Just take up a position of symmetry, feet symmetrically on the ground, and your hands resting on your knees and thighs, back fairly straight without being too rigid, head well balanced on your shoulders, and gently close your eyes. And just focus on your breath. Gently breathing in and out quite normally. And now, if you can, choose to breathe in and out through your nose. Slow down and deepen the in and out breath through your nose. And become aware of the difference in temperature of the air entering the nostrils compared to the temperature of the air leaving the nostrils. You'll find that the air entering is slightly cooler than the air which is being exhaled is slightly warmer. And focus on that temperature differential. Cool air entering, warm air exiting. And with your next in-breath, slow and deep, direct the air down to your abdomen. The way to achieve that is, as you take an in-breath, expand your abdomen to collect the air, and then pull your abdomen in to expel the air. So take a slow, deep breath in, expanding the abdomen, collecting the air, and now contract the abdomen to force the air out again. This is a little counterintuitive, so it needs to be practiced. Slow, deep breath in, expanding the abdomen, contracting the abdomen, forcing the air out. And just practice that for 3 or 4 breaths. And the trick is to expand the abdomen on the in-breath. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing. We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4, all abdominally. Take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And continue to breathe in through your nose, abdominally, rhythmically, smoothly, deeply, gracefully. A perfect circle. And just be aware how in the space of a few short minutes you have become totally at ease, restful, removed from conflict and fear. Something you can achieve anytime you want through this breathing exercise. And now let me segue to the visualization. Become aware of a source of light inside your head. Picture it in any way you want. A light source in your head, pleasant, warm, comfortable, providing light and brightness throughout your head space. Brighten the light a little more so that it flows freely through your face, downwards into your neck. Increase the intensity of the light comfortably so it flows more freely down through your neck into your torso, the upper body. Feel the warmth of that light spreading throughout your chest and back area, feeling its brightness, warmth, comfort. And intensify the light even more so it now enters into your heart, providing insight, elevating, wisening. Intensify the light in your head further so it now flows down in through your limbs, your arms, your hands, your fingers, even further down your thighs, legs, feet, and toes, allowing your whole body to feel a glow, warm, comfortable. Intensify the light more so it begins now to glow out of your body beyond your skin, creating an aura around you. A beautiful, safe aura, which we call Magen Avraham, Abraham's shield. Be aware of the Magen Avraham all around you, protecting you, shielding you, allowing you to maintain your health and composure at all times. To activate that defensive shield, become aware of it. As soon as you become aware of it, you activate it, and it has its desirable effects of protecting you. But intensify the light even more so that your aura spreads around your family, around your household, giving it total protection, shielding all those who are close to you, no matter where they might be out in the world, making your personal contribution to the world at large. Something that is unique to you and your capacity to be able to bring it into the world. Spend a few moments enjoying the inner tranquility, the inner peace, and the safety that you create for yourself and share with others. Focus again on your breath through your nose, becoming aware of cooler air entering and warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes wherever you might be. Move your fingers, move your toes. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back into the room, back together with me now. Well, we had a little journey. I'm hoping that with some of the insights of our introductory talk, and then with our meditational exercise, you're able to walk away from the session, at least allowing yourself the option of confidence, of emunah and bitachon. Of course, without reinforcement, it'll dissipate. And Baruch Hashem, you happen to have wonderful rabbis and rebbitzins here who are fully conversant with the spiritual theory and materials, especially through Sefer Tanya, as was mentioned earlier. Join them. Expand your awareness and your consciousness. It behooves every Jewish person to look into their own backyard in order to be able to become wiser in the way that only your soul can be. So let me just say the parting word this way. Hashem created 71 different soul typologies in existence. 71. One of these is Jewish. Each one has its particular goal and mission in life. It's like a symphony orchestra. And unless the pianist is true to the piano and the notes, unless the violinist is true to the violin and the notes, it makes no sense if the cellist were to jump in the middle of the symphony and grab hold of the trombone. You'd have noise. It makes no sense if the Jewish person has recourse to non-Jewish notes of life and tries to play someone else's music. Only when we Jewish people play our own notes do we help the non-Jewish world to be able to play their notes, and in so doing, make the world a much better place. Okay, I think this is a good time perhaps to pause and have comment and hopefully discuss to some extent. So I turn it back over to Rabbi. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So thank you very much, Rabbi Laibl. That was both very moving on an intellectual level and on an experiential level. We all really, all those that felt they had a great time listening to Rabbi Wolf, give us a thumbs up, please. Can we have some thumbs up here from everybody? Yeah. Okay. And the people are still coming back from their experience. Some people, I think, we lost in outer space a little bit.
I heard snoring.
Yeah. So if anyone would like to ask some questions, the rabbi here, as you can see, is very, very eloquent and very, very knowledgeable in all the spiritual concepts. And he has a lot to offer and to share with us. And I think just listening to the rabbi, I got a little de-stressed. I'm breathing better right now. And tomorrow when I go back to my congregants, I'm not going to be so uptight. I'm going to be calm, and I'll be able to do some good, as they say, breathing is important, especially at the age of COVID. I think that's a time that we learned the importance of breathing. So if anyone would like to present a question to Rabbi Laibl, you can unmute yourself and share with us. Or if anyone wants to
jumping,
go ahead.
Tanya here. I'm jumping
Yes,
right
Tanya.
in. Rabbi, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I put the information of this class into my calendar, and it was meant to be. And I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, gushing over, but I wanted to ask you, because of my daughter and son-in-law, they are about tshuva and they're learning so much, and we are also on the path. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful journey that we're on. And there's been an interest in Kabbalah, and it was like pulling me, and I'm thinking, okay, I know what the rabbis will say. You have to learn how to crawl and walk before you can run or fly. And that's what I'm thinking. And yet, at the same time, I do these things, you know, the meditation and everything, just naturally. I've learned a lot. But Rabbi, I'm just wondering, what you suggest, like you heard, I'm starting learning the Tanya book, and it's a lot to learn. And I'm in my late 50s, and I know my whole life will be learning and learning and learning. But I'm just so excited right now. I just needed to jump in and thank you and ask you where the heck to start or continue.
Okay.
That's a big
Where do you
question.
start? Life is big and knowledge is immense. When we first all met, do you remember when we first all met together? It's about 3,500 years ago at Mount Sinai. You don't remember, eh? Short-term memory. It happens to all of us. Okay. So that's when we first met, and we witnessed Moshe Rabbeinu coming down from Mount Sinai, and he taught us Hashem's Torah at 4 different levels: Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Different degrees of complexity, right down to the 4th level of Sod, which is identified with Kabbalah. Right then and there at Har Sinai, we received all levels of the Torah. Admittedly, the deepest level was passed on from master to student. The student received it from the master, the Hebrew infinitive to receive, lekabel, the noun Kabbalah. However, it was a subterranean tradition because we had to first learn to swim before we could scuba dive and then deep sea diving. And then, as there is within history, a genetic evolution of time, and certain insights become more and more manifest as in the genetic code of any human being. You move from childhood to teenagehood, and from teenagehood to young adulthood, and the physiology of the body has different growth spurts. So does knowledge, Jewish knowledge, have growth spurts of being revealed. And then in the 18th century, the deepest level of Kabbalah, which was cryptic, and we were ill-advised to enter into it unless we were correctly prepared, was fortunately made public through the agency of the Baal Shem Tov and through the teachings of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe 3 generations later. We have the capacity to enter into Chassidut. So when you say we need to sort of evolve and move towards depth, it was understood that the world was changing so quickly. We had the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution not long before at that time. We had the beginnings of nationalism at that time. We had the beginnings of scientific method. There was a very rapid growth of the world, which needed to be matched by a rapid understanding of deeper wisdom. And that deeper wisdom is now available to all of us. So we cannot any longer, in a world of complexity, as adults to go back to being children. And as adults, mature adults, you begin at a mature level. You begin at the level of Chassidus. You begin in the fourth deep level of Kabbalah, but as explained by Chassidus, which looks at the nature of the human being, nature of the place of the human being in the cosmos, and also insights into the higher levels from which we stem from. So, Tanya, what I'm saying to you is, go into the deep. You said your name is Tanya, and therefore you study Tanya with Goldie, I believe. So, therefore, continue. Mature people, adults in this day and age, must enter into Jewish maturity. To understand the do's and don'ts is insufficient. It's essential, but now we have to understand the why of the do's and don'ts and enjoy the journey of the depth.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful, Rabbi, beautiful. I remember, in fact, when Goldie started giving the Tanya class, so there was a lady that came in and she asked Goldie, "What's your name?" Goldie says, "My name's Goldie." She says, "Oh, but I came here for Tanya." And now we know why Tanya Friedman has to come to the Tanya class, because now it can be called Tanya.
It's all been shared. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
They say the name Tanya also comes from the word Eitan. If you flip the letters, it's Eitan, strength. So that's the strength of Chassidus, the strength of...
Let me add that I produce daily 3-minute meditations. They arrive on WhatsApp. And therefore, in the chat, you will see I've given you my email address and instructions if you want to receive daily these short meditations. It's no use, by the way, putting it on the chat. I'm not going to be able to see the chat later. You must email it to me, and all that detail is there on the chat for you to have a look.
Okay.
Because I've noticed a number of people like Michael and others saying, oh, I've given you my number on the chat. No use. You must email it to me.
Okay. So what's your email again?
It's all there.
It's all there.
Have a look at the chat. You'll see spiritgrow@laibelwolf.com.
Oh, very good.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, great.
Scroll through.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I mailed it, Rabbi. Michael
Good,
Shapiro.
Michael. Good, Michael.
Michael, you're here with us. That's great. I see there are some people here that are mentioning that they... On Pesach.
Ruth and Barry. Were you in Croatia for Pesach experience, Rabbi Wolf?
Yes.
So Ruth and Barry. Ruth is one of my good friends. She met you there.
And she say that you gave them great tools for life.
Thank you. I see the faces here, and I cannot quite always. Did I see them in Canada? Did I see them in America? Was it Croatia?
We're in Canada.
You put me in context.
No,
Okay.
we met you in Croatia for Pesach 2 years ago.
Yes, of course. And now I recognize you, sure.
And I've got a picture of you on the ferry.
Ruth, can we see you? Open your video, Ruth.
You know what? I wasn't asked if I wanted to go with video, so I don't even know how to do that. Oh, maybe here.
On the left side, it gives you an option.
Okay.
Down the bottom, just click it.
Okay, so this is like...
Left side. That's Okay, your right side.
Where,
yes,
darling?
Okay, so...
Oh, start video. Okay. Oh,
Thank you very much, Laibl.
you'll forgive what I look like.
Give a round of applause.
There you are.
There
Okay.
we are.
Okay,
Bye.
Hi
so
there.
Really
nice to see you.
Rabbi Wolf,
Thank you very much.
I wanted to thank you. I met you when you came to Riverdale. I'm a physician, and I don't know if you recall our discussions. And this was a good boost today.
I'm glad.
They're very
Thank you
needed,
very
very
much.
helpful, and I'm glad to see. I still get your emails regularly, and I'm glad to see all the work that you're doing in Australia. And I guess we can all sign in for more of your lectures through that.
Absolutely. And give Rabbi Shem Tov my warm regards.
I shall.
And more people should be listening to this. Maybe we'd have a better world. More people.
Yes, Hashem.
these were the most amazing tools for the time. It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. We're gonna
Are
say
you in Australia now or are you here?
No,
In North
I'm in
America.
Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, so it must be like, what time is it?
It's
10 past
tomorrow
9 in the
mo-
morning.
It's now 1:10 tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, you better go and have your lunch.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the future. Is it a good future?
We can. I tell you, when Mashiach comes, I'll let you all know when Mashiach comes.
You would have known already a few minutes earlier. Thank you so much, Rabbi Laibl. Thank you for coming. Thank you all.
Rabbi Laibl, there is no lockdowns in Australia right now?
Sorry, say again?
No lockdowns in Australia?
No, we've actually managed to conquer COVID. There are practically no cases,
That's
not even
amazing.
deaths, no cases of COVID in the whole of Australia. We had a
People don't
very
wear masks?
serious, we had no masks. We had a very serious lockdown for 2 months earlier in the year, and it was very severe. We couldn't leave our houses except for 1 hour to do shopping or exercise. We couldn't go to any malls, they were closed. We couldn't have people visiting us, and we conquered it.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. See you for the next meeting. All the best. Don't forget to